Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. We are getting closer and closer to the 2025 NFL draft. And one of the things that I've done every year for I don't know how many years now is talk to Brent Taylor of SB Nation's Roll Bama Roll, which covers the Alabama Crimson Tide, about the draft prospects coming out of Alabama, and Brent is here with us today. How you doing, Brent? There are no prospects from Alabama that the Giants care about, right?
Hey, I'm doing great. I think this is, I don't know how many years we've done this, but this is my fourth house that I've done this podcast with you in. And
Oh
four
wow,
houses, and
wow, four
East Coast
houses.
to, yeah,
That's
East Coast to West
I don't
Coast. I'm
know.
out in
You
California now.
you, you need to settle down, my man. You need to settle down. Come
Yeah,
on.
tell me
Jet
about it.
setting all around the country. Jeez. I
But
don't
anyway,
know.
yeah.
So you
Yeah, I
said
don't figure there's,
you're in
go ahead.
California. You're in California these days?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Moved
it looked like
Alabama to California back in 23.
there you go. All right. So I was going to say it looks like there's some daylight coming through that window over there next to you. So it's got to be earlier. It's definitely earlier where you are than where I am here in upstate New York. So anyway, let's get into Alabama prospects. There's quite a few, maybe not quite as many as there have been. Some of the years you and I have done this, but there are a few names to go through, and of course, the big one that we have to talk about is quarterback Jalen Milroe, a guy who, of course, has been connected to the Giants, in some circles. Brent, let me start with this. What was your reaction to Milroe getting and accepting, an invitation to Green Bay for the first night of the draft?
I my like the very first reaction was a bit of a surprise. I didn't really expect it, but uh, with the way it seemed like over the last 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, it seemed like he's just been slowly climbing up. Everybody's like all these inner circles of maybe he is a little higher draft pick than we were thinking for a while.
Yeah,
So I'm not sure I was that surprised.
I know this much. I don't know that he'll go in the first round, but I don't believe that the NFL would have extended that invitation, or that he would have accepted it without the belief that he goes at the latest really, really early in the second round. When, of course, if he goes really early, they can still make a big fuss about it on the broadcast.
Oh yeah, I think there's something to it. I think there's a little bit of info there. Um, yeah,
So let's talk about quarterbacks in general. I mean, obviously guys get pushed up the board just because it's such an important position. Um, the way I look at it, I tend to think with Milroe, I think it's highly unlikely that he's still on the board after 34, which is the Giants' second pick in round, it's in round 2. The way it seems to be trending, I think at least 4, if not all 5 of those, the guys considered to be in the top quarterback tier. I think at least 4 of those guys are going to be gone, maybe all 5 of them. You see it that way as well?
um, I'm not sure I do. I think we know Cam Ward, right?
Right.
Right at the top. Past that, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I believe anyone is a for sure first round pick after Cam Ward.
Yeah, I don't know.
Will it
I
happen?
I can't imagine. I can't imagine Shadur Sanders falling all the way out of the first round, and I think somebody's gonna jump for Jackson Dart as well. That's how I feel about it. So then you're talking about what happens with Milroe and what happens with Tyler Shuck. Um, let's talk about Milroe. Just as an NFL prospect, what kind of 2024 season did he have? Was he as good in 2024, maybe as he was in 2023? Did he really look like a guy who can be an NFL starting quarterback, to during last season?
In the moment, I would have said no. By the end of the season, most Alabama fans were fairly excited for him to declare for the draft. In hindsight, I think there's a lot of circumstances that kind of show hey, the production was not up to expectations in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
That said, going back to 23, Milroe's biggest issue by far was pocket presence. So he really, really struggled with making quick decisions. It seemed like every team would just double A gap blitz him every single time, and he'd just fall apart. Going into 24, we actually saw a lot of progress from him on kind of those identifying blitzes, getting balls out. He took way, way less sacks. Like the sacks came way down. And he improved on a lot of that, like the processing side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the weirdest thing happened was his accuracy just fell off the cliff. And it didn't really make a lot of sense. Like we'd seen him the year before, he can make all those throws. And then 24 happened, and it's like he'd have 2 games, 3 games, or it was great, no issues. And then Tennessee game happens. Oklahoma game happens, either of the Michigan games. It just seems like he mentally spirals. And when he does, it affects the accuracy. And ultimately, if you don't throw the ball straight to a receiver, the offense craters.
Right. Was there some difficulty for him in the fact that obviously Alabama had a new head coach in 2024? Was there some issue with him in style of offense, or just the change from Nick Saban to Caleb DeBoer?
I think so. And I think even before that, offensive coordinator wise, Alabama went from Bill O'Brien, who was trying to run a Tom Brady like offense, like it was still 2011, to a guy named Tommy Rees, who had offensive coordinated all of 1 year before that, to a Nick Sheridan, who had also offensive coordinated all of about 1 year and was kind of the last second promotion after Ryan Grubb left Alabama for Seattle. So Milroe kind of went 3 different schemes, 3 very, very different goals of the offense, and 2 of those coordinators were basically in their first time doing it. I think that hurt a lot. Alabama also had pretty poor offensive line play both years, no running game to speak of. So there's a lot of extenuating circumstances there.
Okay.
That said, the accuracy was bad, man.
Mm-hmm. Even with that, he still completed 65% of his passes, something like that. Is in your mind, the comparison, the recent comparison that keeps coming up with Milroe is Anthony Richardson? Is that fair? I mean, I look at Richardson and I shook my head like, how could you take this guy at number 4 in the draft? Because he's in no way, shape, or form was he a quarterback coming out of college.
I don't think they're that similar players. They're both, like, Milroe's got speed, right? And that's a level of speed that it was, Anthony Richardson, sure. Style-wise, no, I don't think so. Richardson was much better, I guess, at kind of the improv, scrambling around type plays. Milroe's that's not really Milroe's game, right? He can run, and when he goes, he's really moving, but he's not much of a scramble around improv guy. He
Mm-hmm.
either makes a normal quarterback play or he is booking it upfield somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really see the Anthony Richardson comparison. Um, I heard the Seahawkers podcast. I did jumped on with them a couple days ago, brought up Cam Newton. And I think that's a more accurate style. Obviously, he's not a number one overall 6'6" generational talent, but I think style wise, it's a very similar game.
Interesting. That's that's an interesting comparison, and the other thing that's interesting is one of the draft analysts who I rely on quite a bit for quarterbacks and skill position guys is Matt Waldman, who runs the rookie scouting portfolio. And I don't know if you know of Matt's work, but in looking at Matt's work and in talking to Matt, he points out more. You look at Milroe as a quote unquote developmental guy, and everybody says, "Oh, he needs a year, he needs 2 years to develop and learn," and maybe he does need a year. But I think Matt's point, Matt really likes Milroe, and he seems to think that there's more polish to his quarterback play than a lot of other people seem to believe. Just your thoughts on Milroe and his pure quarterback play, not just the athleticism.
I agree. I think Milroe's shown really over the years, he's shown a lot of moments of like, yes, I've taken this coaching, I can do these kind of being a legitimate quarterback, and we've seen that growth over the years. The problem with him has always been doing it every game, right? So he'll show 2, 3, 4 games in a row of, hey, this guy is, again, I go back to identifying blitzes. He's got good pocket movement. He's got this great ability to make throws downfield right as he's getting hit. A lot of cool things that are NFL like stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then when a game spirals away from him, all of it goes out the window. And that I think is what is preventing him from being a guaranteed number 5 overall type player
Mm-hmm.
to one that can you fix those spirals.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
yeah, polish wise, I think he's leagues ahead. He gets compared a lot on our end of things to Jalen Hurts.
I was going to ask you about Hurts next. So, obviously you're very familiar with Hurts.
Yeah,
So let's talk about whether you think that's an apt comparison and if he can develop into a Hurts type player.
I think Milroe is well ahead of where Hurts was at this point. Hurts continued to develop in the NFL, honestly, way further than I ever thought he would. But Milroe's got significantly better, kind of your down to down quarterbacking stuff down than Hurts ever did. Where Jalen Hurts was kind of exceeded him was in turnover risk reward management, right? Milroe will go for things sometimes, and Hurts was ultimately a Saban quarterback that did not turn the ball over, sometimes to a fault. But that's where Hurts kind of passed Milroe up. But overall, I think Jalen Milroe is much more polished.
Interesting. So you think, there are people who say that they think that if Jalen Milroe hits his ceiling, he could end up being the best quarterback in this class. Do you agree with that? And what do you think the likelihood of that might be?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with it. If he, like I said a minute ago, if he fixes those brain spirals, then yeah, he is without a doubt, I think, the best player in this class. I spent part of last season thinking he was a number 1 overall pick. And then I saw the end of last season and thought he should go undrafted. So,
wow. Wow. You Carson Becked him on your board. Jeez.
I know. But yeah, I think if he hits that, you fix those inconsistencies, he's the best quarterback in this draft. I think pretty easily. Cam Ward, I like Cam Ward a lot. I think he'll be a good quarterback in the NFL, and I think he's a pretty safe one to go with. But I don't think he'll be great. And I personally have no trust in any other quarterback in this draft. Now, what do I think the likelihood Milroe hits that? 30%? 20? I'm not sure.
Right. But of course, he still has the running, and he still has the big arm. So there are still things to lean on. What do you think of the Giants? What do you think of Brian Daboll? What do you think of New York as a fit for Milroe? And I mean, before I even let you answer that, I will just say I know that Daboll was in Alabama for a year, but it's complicated with the Giants for the simple reason that it's year 4, and Daboll will enter year 4 on the hot seat. It's complicated for any young quarterback, I think. So I'm just curious for your take on the fit with Milroe and the Giants.
I'll be interested to see how it goes with Russell Wilson there too. As my NFL team is the Seahawks, so I was a big Russell Wilson guy for a long time. So that one would be fascinating because Wilson's entire approach is so different to what Milroe is, and how he can learn from that would be weird to see, I think. As far as the Giants as a whole, I don't know. From the outside looking in, like right, I've seen the Daniel Jones saga. You kind of view like, okay, the Jets are where quarterbacks go to die. The Giants are where, okay, they can run. But we haven't seen much from the Giants in so long. Yeah, from the outside, it's like, well, they'll probably be decent.
Yeah, it's just hard because I look at, they talk about developmental quarterbacks and good situations for quarterbacks, and I think about Milroe, and I think it would be detrimental to Milroe if they draft Milroe and then Daboll is one and done with the kid, and then Daboll's out the door after 2025.
Yeah.
So
and now Milroe's on his 4th coach in 4 years.
Right.
5 years.
Yeah, that's actually something, that I hadn't really thought about because of the changeover in Alabama. He hasn't had that consistency for a while. So that'll be interesting. I don't know what the Giants are going to do, but I suspect that I'll be a little bit surprised if Milroe's not off the board after those first 2 picks in the second round, which, Cleveland at 33, I keep, our Cleveland guy is adamant that Milroe doesn't get past 33. So we shall see.
I keep hearing the Steelers at 21.
I've heard that too.
Popping up. I'm like, I don't know. There seems to be some smoke to that one.
I've heard that one too. I think the complicating factor there is whether Shedeur Sanders falls that far.
Yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, I've heard that one as well. But but you never know. Could be a Giant, might not be a Giant. Maybe the Giants don't get a quarterback at all. Who knows? Brent, let's move on from Milroe. I'm just going to throw, a handful of other names at you. And then, at the end, you can tell me if I missed anybody or if there's anybody else we should pay attention to. Let's talk about Tyler Booker, the big, powerful guard, left guard, I believe. That's where he spent almost all of his time, and a guy who some people think he'll be off the board before 34. So just your thoughts on Booker.
Yeah, I think he'll probably go before that. The NFL needs guards so bad right now. Like everyone needs linemen.
Mm-hmm.
He'll go before 34. That said, I think he gets pushed up the board a little due to scarcity of guards.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a good player.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a great pass blocker. And I think he's an overrated run blocker. I think he struggled often with short yardage run blocking. He's a bit too tall for a guard.
Hmm.
I have always said he was recruited as a tackle. Alabama moved him inside because that was where they had an opening early. And then in year 2, Nick Saban kind of had a moment and just decided he was going to try to run the ball no matter what in his final year. All of our linemen beefed up to like 350 pounds in the same year. The whole thing went very poorly. And then, Booker dropped back down to 335-ish last year, but I don't think his body ever quite recovered from that big of a swing that way and back. That said, I think he's a great pass blocker. I think he's an average run blocker.
Interesting. Which you wouldn't you would think a guy as big and as powerful as he looks would be a devastating, or could be a devastating, run blocker.
Yeah, and that's once he gets like second level and there's a linebacker in front of him and he can kind of plow through them. Great. That can be a lot of fun. He's mean. But in those just one-on-one with someone shorter than him, they can get under him and kind of block him up some.
Let me ask you about Malachi Moore, safety. The Giants obviously drafted Tyler Nubin, second round last year. They added Javon Holland in free agency, so they don't necessarily need a starting safety. They could still use some depth there. They have Dane Belton, who's a fourth round pick 2 or 3 years back, who really hasn't established himself. When I do these mock drafts and I think of adding a safety, for depth purposes later on in the draft, I keep coming back to Moore. So just tell us a little bit about Moore as an NFL prospect.
Yeah, so Moore was a freshman All-American back in 2020. Funny enough, he actually passed Brian Branch, if you remember him from the draft process a couple seasons ago. They're both freshmen. Brian Branch was like making an impact early. We thought he was going to be a true freshman starter. And he gets COVID, misses most of camp. And then Moore just kind of took the job and goes on to win freshman All-American. Great. You're like, okay, this dude's going to be awesome, right? But going into 21, Branch actually just kind of passed him back and took the job back. So then we didn't see Malachi Moore again, other than like 6 DB rotations for 2 more seasons. Then in 23, Malachi Moore gets back on the field. He moves from nickel corner to safety. And that seemed to help him a lot. His biggest issue is he's 6 foot, maybe 200-ish. So not quite like an NFL size safety, but not too small. But then he's not really fast enough to be a corner either. So the moving back to safety seemed to help him a good bit. He got a lot more physical and aggressive, whereas a couple years before that, we saw a lot of not being very physical at times, much to the ire of Alabama fans. So I expected him to go pro after 23. So when he came back for a 5th season, it was kind of surprising. And I actually thought he underwhelmed some in his last season. He had a few issues with on-field yelling at coaches for a few things. which was interesting and kind of felt like he lost some good graces towards the end.
Interesting.
Which, to be fair to him, he had been at Alabama since 2020 and was now witnessing a 9-4 season, which the horror, right? If you don't have those four whole losses, still terrible. But I think Moore can be a decent special teams guy, maybe a flexible safety slot corner backup. I would not expect him to be a starter. He doesn't have the athleticism to do it at the NFL level, I don't think.
So he's a depth guy. How about Q Robinson?
Q is interesting. He's like 6'5", lean, really fast for his size. But he spent 4 years as a special teams only guy. Played behind Will Anderson, Chris Braswell, Dallas Turner. So he never really played, right? Because we had 3 first and second round edges in front of him. Finally got to play as a senior. We thought he'd be a full-time starter, but a younger guy ended up getting more playing time than he did. That said, he was a decent, kind of a third down speed rusher. He could hit the edge, get around the tackle. He doesn't offer much outside of that one speed rush. He's not going to be someone that's going to hold up on the line. He's not going to play off-ball linebacker stuff too well. If you're like, hey, late round situational speed rusher, depth piece,
sure,
you can take a flyer on that athleticism.
But that's pretty much the list that I have. Brent, did I miss anybody who's an obvious draft candidate, obvious guy that you think could have a good NFL career?
Do the Giants have any need for a tight end?
That depends. Maybe as a depth piece. Okay.
If you do, I think CJ Dupree is probably the most underrated player in Alabama's class this year. He transferred in from North Carolina a couple seasons ago, and for 2 years, Alabama is just like not throwing the ball much at all, right? It's been Jalen Milroe runs a lot, and that's where a lot of the volume of the offense is gone. So there's not a lot of passing volume to go around over the last couple seasons. And obviously, tight ends fall down that pecking order of passing volume. But CJ Dupree is a guy that I think he has a level of athleticism that is kind of not really known. He's got quite a few highlights over his career of hurdling over guys. I think he's got a pretty cool one-handed catch back at North Carolina. Then during the combine, he threw out a 35-inch vertical jump at 260 pounds, which was kind of eye-opening. Like this dude has got some juice to him. Decent blocker, but I think even more impressive as a pass catcher and that doing some damage after the catch. I think he's a really interesting prospect that if he gets more passing volume, he could be, I think, a legitimate NFL player.
So you think really he's just a guy that to this point maybe has been kind of underutilized? It looks like I'm just looking at some numbers. In 2022, he had 30 catches, but he's only got 32 catches combined the last 2 years. So you think maybe just underutilized the last couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted him to get the ball a lot more than he did.
Well, maybe we can maybe you can petition to be Alabama's next offensive coordinator.
Oh Lord, we've got a running joke among Alabama fans about one of these days we're going to have an offensive coordinator that uses a tight end. But it is a long-standing joke. Even Lane Kiffin had a secret playbook or like secret pages in his playbook for the tight ends, but we never got to see him. They
were under lock and key that even he didn't have the Even he didn't have the key?
He broke it out for one game. It was national championship versus Clemson. Threw it to OJ Howard for a couple touchdowns, and we've been
Wow.
hoping for tight end catches ever since.
That feels like the Wayback Machine. OJ Howard.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. Is this, by the way, does this feel like a light year for Alabama prospect wise in terms of, the number of guys that you think might get drafted?
I think it's pretty on par with the last few years. Alabama had a strong run for a little while there in that 15 to 2020 range.
Mm-hmm.
But really, since 22, this has been pretty normal. One or two guys looking at first round, maybe three.
Mm-hmm.
And then for whatever reason, it seems like Alabama's always been, you get the guys at the top, you get the first rounders, and then there seems to be a lag in day two. And then we kind of fill out quite a few in that 6th round range.
Interesting. Hey, before I let you go, I got to ask you, how weird was it, watching college football games last fall and watching Nick Saban show personality on television?
I knew that personality was there. He's always had that kind of messing with everyone. He just, once he didn't have the pressure of trying to, I think he was always trying to defend his players in some way, and a lot of that came out as grumpiness with the media, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's always had that joking around with people in his own weird Saban way. So it was cool to see like the rest of the nation catch on of like, this guy's actually a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, New York fans are, we've had a few years to get used to it now, but Eli Manning has spent, a lot of time showing us the personality he never showed us while he was quarterbacking the Giants, and that's fun to watch.
Yeah.
So all right, Brent, I appreciate the time, and we will definitely do this again next year. Wherever you happen to be living, and whatever, maybe you'll be in a 5th home, but your email address stays the same, so I can still find you. So
you can still find me. I don't plan to move this one. We'll see.
All right. Well, I
say that every time.
We'll see about that. All right. The track record is what the track record is. All right. Brent, thank you very, very much. And Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.